Episode 74. Care less, be happier.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
And here he is, your host that doesn't give a fuck. Before you think that, let me wipe that thought off your mind. Clearly, welcome to the 74th episode of the very best podcast in the world. The only place in the universe for personal supremacy development through health, wealth, and happiness. Boom, there we go. Now, before we manifest the misunderstanding that you shouldn't give a fuck, let me clarify that. It's not that you shouldn't care for your surrounding. It's not that you shouldn't care for the loved ones in your life. It's not that you shouldn't care about the environment. It's not that you shouldn't care for your earthly possessions should you need them. It's not that you shouldn't care for the woods. It's not that you shouldn't care for whatever. It goes to say that there's a lot of stuff you should care about, but care about the things that you can control and influence. Don't care about the things you can't. And I'm going to reference episode number 5, which was an exercise, and I recommend you do the exercise because it's one of the ones that I got the most feedback for, interestingly enough, and the feedback was pretty much all positive. So, that being said, go back to episode 5, do the exercise later. Listen to this episode now. In that episode, we discussed, those were my fingers crackling, not the fireplace. In that episode, we went ahead and said, okay, look, what can we control and what can we not control? Well, we made a list, 2 sides of a sheet of paper, and the things we couldn't control, we tossed. In a nutshell, that was it. Listen to episode 5 for the details. And one thing came to my attention. Now, we live very isolated. And if I talk to people, normally it's over the phone and via email and via instant messenger, the modern email thing, kind of, because the messages come instantly, not that push emails don't, but, well, the world needed another thing. And I started to observe something, and that was that every call, every visitor that we got, pretty much everyone, inevitably, you discussed with or you talked with, the topic went to the Rona, or COVID, as it is called less condescendingly. And many years ago, I tuned out of the news cycle. I get a very selective news feed that I curated myself, and it doesn't involve world news. And here is why. Now, there are things I can influence in the world, and that's, for instance, how good my apple tree grows because I put fertilizer on it, or, well, dung at the end of the day. Horse shit. There's, I can influence how my infamous Stevie co-host behaves during the show. Stevie is the dog, by the way. Oh, by the way, Stevie's got an Instagram. If you want to know it, let me know. He's the cutest. That's the comments he gets. I don't. So I'm kind of pissed. And many years ago, I was like, I was following the news and business and world and happening and not happening and whatever. And I just got more and more frustrated by the sheer amount of incompetence in solving world issues that I said, I was getting outraged over it. And I was getting so pissed and depressed and whatnot, because you feel powerless at the end of the day. And you can't blame the news outlets for presenting that shit, because shit sells. Normally sex sells, but in the news business, it's shit, disastrous situations. Nobody wants to hear good news at the end of the day. That's at least what the news people tell you. So I tuned out and I said, screw you all, I'm going home. And that was it for my world news. Now, occasionally I pick something up on Facebook. My Facebook feed is very well manipulated, so I don't get all too much of it. But the new thing that kind of surfaced was that you can't switch off the Rona. You can't. You just can't. Despite the fact that you click everything away and you don't want to see it and whatever, as some asshole always pops up and has breaking news about the Rona. And so am I informed? No, I'm not at all informed. I've got a very bad gut feeling about this whole thing, but that's it. I've got some evidence from the tinfoil hat battalion, and I've got some information and intelligence from the conventional news outlets, and somewhere in between, there is my center of balance in what I believe about this thing. And my view is slightly tending towards the tinfoil hat battalion rather than the conventional news, because they do such a terrible job in explaining the whole thing, right? And contradict each other regularly. So that being said, it's like now the Rona doesn't affect my life at all. It hasn't changed. I live on our farm and I don't leave, period. I left occasionally to do some grocery shopping or to, visit some friends. That still happens, although everybody's running around with weird masks. And if you don't, you get severe penalties. But that's pretty much all that's changed for me personally, right? And so that being said, I was pissed about the disease, about the pandemic, about the situation, about the global turbulence about to happen, the disastrous economic consequences, etc. Not for myself, but for all of the poor souls out there that have to sit in a 50 square meter apartment somewhere, are not allowed to go out and live on those 50 square meters with, 5, 6 people. And they have to get along, and they can't go outside, and they can't, meet in public places because the Rona spreads there and it doesn't on airplane, whatever. I was pissed. I tried to figure that out. Why am I so pissed? And I very quickly came to the conclusion that it doesn't affect me. So I don't have to be pissed. Plus, it was based merely on my gut, which is normally right, in about 99% of the cases. So my gut feeling is always kind of spot on. And I was like, okay, why? Or first thought was, well, this will blow over. It'll be over. And then we can go back to normal. It turns out we can't. There are the opportunists that are taking advantage of the situation, and they are going to introduce a new normal, which may affect me. And that's where I got pissed again. And so this vicious cycle started with the bottom line that I couldn't do anything about it. And I think for a lot of people, they can't let go of this requirement for powerlessness, right? And getting into that and getting all worked up and having something to talk about, while it would have been totally more exciting to really speak about, gardening or the internet or, all of the other interesting shit going on in the world. That would have been the positive news aspect. However, it would have been much more interesting to solve local problems, right? How can we support the local industry if they didn't have to lock down? That happened now. But goes to say, I was worried about things I cannot influence, and I'm still worried about things that I cannot influence. Only now it doesn't affect me directly, at least not immediately and not directly. And so I felt sorry for other people and got worked up about that. And that was a very interesting situation and a first, right? That being said, moving on, because I think I spent too much time on my personal, rage. So, start ignoring the things you can't control, because there's no point in, getting excited over them, as there's nothing you can do. You get worked up. The collective energy field becomes more toxic, and live with it, flow with it as much as you can. Don't get affected by it as much as you can. There's nothing you can do with the higher powers make you do stupid shit, jump through hoops. Accept it, accept the powers that be, change them during your next election. Although, nothing much is going to happen at the end of the day. It's going to stay the way it is. But focus on the things that you actually can influence. And it's a very important thing to understand. You're wasting time and energy and, kind of clogging up your negativity filters. And you will, once you kind of get rid of those things in your life that you can't influence, you focus more on the things you can influence, and the things you do influence then have a positive outcome, which will positively motivate you. And that's the bottom line. And go back, listen to episode 5, because that's where this exercise is buried in one of the first episodes. I think it's rather crappy, but bear with me. It's rewarding. Trust me. And, it goes to say, take out the things that you can't influence, tune out of the news cycle. If somebody tells you something, it's like, yeah, okay. Boom, /ignore that person. And, then go ahead and focus on the shit that you can do. I don't know, renovate your place. I don't know, tune up your stereo, whatever it is at the end of the day. But something that presents you with results, because they are things you can influence and control, versus the things that you can't control, which are, talking about the news cycle, usually bad, right? And just tune them out of your life and focus on the things you can influence, you can really manipulate in a positive way and have a positive outcome, a successful experience. And speaking of that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Have a successful day. If you have a good night. Remember to share this episode with a friend or 2 or 10 or 100. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And I shall hear you tomorrow when, speaking of exercise, in episode 5, we are going to do another exercise about existence of yourself. Stay tuned. See you tomorrow.